Can Quinshon Judkins save the Browns offense in week 3 against the Green Bay Packers? We'll talk about it. It's Peter Bukowski and Spencer German with a crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Packers.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome on in, Packers fans. Welcome on in, Browns fans. It's Spencer German and Peter Bukowski with you for this crossover edition of Locked On Packers and Locked On Browns, and plenty to dissect as we get you ready for this weekend's matchup between the two squads here in Cleveland, and a lot of overarching storylines with these two teams. Plus, we'll look at some key matchups on both sides and the path to victory. As hard as it may be for the Browns, I will try to come up with a path to victory, Peter. But I do think entering this game, a lot of the storylines with this team revolve still around the fact that Micah Parsons is obviously a Green Bay Packer and how disruptive he's been to start things off. But first, I do want to remind you guys that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. And Peter, what has life been like with Micah Parsons 2 games into this experience that obviously has the Packers playing great football, but also very much in the Super Bowl conversation?
Yeah, I think the only fan base that is familiar with this sort of experience outside of the Dallas Cowboys, who used to have Micah Parsons, would be Browns fans who get to watch Myles Garrett every week just wreck games single-handedly. I mean, I thought he was going to beat the Bengals by himself practically in week 1. And if he'd have been the guy catching the passes from Joe Flacco, maybe they would have, honestly. So it is one of those things, and I've been saying this on my show. I've said it on radio hits that I've done. It's a different experience to watch someone from afar dominate and be awesome. And then to see the impact that they have on the team that you cover, that you watch, that you know intimately, and see the impact it has on Rashawn Gary and Lucas Van Ness and Edgerrin Cooper. And I wrote about this for The Leap, which for Browns fans is a football newsletter that we do about the Packers, that the Packers are one of 3 teams with 5 guys with at least 5 pressures already through 2 weeks. And Edgerrin Cooper, this is wild. So the Packers' second-year linebacker, Edgerrin Cooper, he has 8 pass rush reps this year. He has 5 pressures. It's that sort of efficiency that you can generate. And it's because you line him up in the A-gap. Maybe you line him up next to Micah Parsons. The very first rep Micah Parsons had as a Green Bay Packer, he was standing up to Jared Goff's right-hand side against Penei Sewell, and it's Lucas Van Ness, Edgerrin Cooper, and Micah Parsons in a row, standing up, wondering who's going to come. Are they going to loop? Are they going to cross? How is this going to be sorted out? Maybe I think Lucas Van Ness actually ended up dropping on that play, if my memory serves. So they're doing a lot of things right now to disguise what's happening. But when Micah Parsons is lined up, he's coming. You don't know who else is coming. And it has really been a force multiplier. We use that term a lot in sports, but it has truly been that. Devontae Wyatt leads all interior pass rushers in pressures this year. And there was one against the Lions where Tate Ratledge is peaking at Micah Parsons against Penei Sewell, one of the best right tackles in the league. But off the snap, he peeks to his right, and by the time he gets back to Devontae Wyatt's in Jared Goff's lap. And so those are the things that Micah Parsons brings. It is truly a wonder to behold his impact.
Yeah, and you're right. It is a pleasure from a Brown standpoint that we get to watch Myles Garrett every week. You know, we're sort of used to that same sort of effect that player like Micah Parsons can have on a game, because Myles Garrett is the exact same way. Teams game plan their entire offense around how can we limit the damage from Myles Garrett. And even though teams kind of go into it understanding too that limit is the best you can do against a guy like Myles Garrett. Yeah. I think the same thing applies to Micah Parsons. Like the Browns are going to try their damnedest to slow him down, keep him from wrecking the game. But we know that there's going to be plays where he just gets back there and makes things difficult. Even if he doesn't get a sack, which I know he already has some, even if he doesn't get a sack, just his presence alone is a disruptive thing. And that's why I think for the Browns, like from their standpoint, one of the biggest storylines for them going into this game is going to be just whether or not Quinshon Judkins in his second week that he'll actually be out there can have the impact that they need him to in the run game to help get this offense sort of actually moving in the right direction. Because right now it's been a disaster. Running the football has not gone well for this team. The Packers, as good as their defense is, they have been a little bit more susceptible. I think they're giving up 4.6 yards per carry average to teams. And so there is a little bit of room to run the football. And the Browns offense is predicated with going back to Kevin Stefanski's system and everything that comes with that on having a good ground game, having a strong ground game that can then set up some of the play action stuff. And we've had Browns fans complaining this week, Peter, about how through 2 games, the Browns just haven't been able to take a lot of shots downfield. And my biggest argument has been, well, there's a reason for that. Teams don't think that they don't respect the Browns run game right now enough that it's a true threat that they need to play up or put extra guys in the box. And so they're just playing 2 high safeties and keeping everything pretty much underneath and preventing Joe Flacco from doing the things that he does best, which is, hey, play action, let's air it out and throw it down the field to somebody like Jerry Jeudy. And so I think that if the Browns are going to have any chance in this game, they're going to have to find success with that run game. And that obviously starts with Quinshon Judkins, who's the guy they drafted in the 2nd round to be their workhorse back.
Yeah, you cannot be one-dimensional, especially when your offense is led by Joe Flacco and Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman. No disrespect, to those guys. They're still NFL players. But, like, we're not talking about Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce. And even that team needed balance. We see now in Kansas City, the Chiefs can't run the ball. And that has huge deleterious impacts on your offense. And so, finding that balance is going to be critical. Now, I will point out, you mentioned the yard per carry average. If you adjust for opponent, because the Lions are like one of the best run teams in the NFL, the Commanders, same deal. This run defense has been adjusted for opponent. Excellent. So DVOA, which is, efficiency adjusting for opponent, they're still a top 5 run defense. They've been the best defense in the NFL through 2 weeks by that same metric. So my audience already knows I like DVOA. Like is probably even underselling how I feel about it. But so that's part of this is you watch Thursday night against the Commanders and the Packers cornerbacks are sitting on everything. Quinshon Nixon, Spencer, had 5 pass breakups on Thursday night alone. His previous career high was 7 for a season. But when you know the ball has to be out because one of these guys is going to be in your lap, then that's a problem. And look, the Browns, I was shocked to learn, among league leaders in passing attempts already through 2 weeks. Part of that's because they've been losing a lot. Yeah. But part of it is too, they can't run the ball. And when you can't run the ball, you feel like the only thing you can do is throw it because that's really your only other option unless you have a quarterback who can run the ball. And Joe Flacco's not that guy. So if for the Browns to have any chance here, they're going to have to create explosives in the passing game, but they're going to have to be balanced in order to do that. And I think that's going to be the tricky part this week.
Yeah, I know the Packers are dealing with some injuries up front and obviously at the wide receiver position as well, conversely. But what I think is interesting about this Packers offense is that Jordan Love is really good at spreading the football around. You talk about being one-dimensional and only really having like so many things that you can count on. For the Browns offense, it's Joe Flacco dropping back, like you said, 45 times largely through these first couple games and trying to throw it downfield to pretty much Jerry Jeudy. Cedric Tillman, he's had some moments, but he's also had some struggles at times this year. I think the other big highlight in the passing game has been Harold Fannin Jr., who's been awesome as a rookie for them. One of the more targeted guys by Flacco. So they have a couple guys that are sort of threats, but it's not enough. And I think conversely, the Packers have like just this wealth of wide receiver talent. They have talent all over the field, tight end position as well. Like they just have with Kraft and obviously, Josh Jacobs is coming out of the backfield. Like there is just so much for the Browns defense to account for. And as good as it is, I think that's going to be another interesting sort of challenge for them on the other side of things.
Well, I mean, the thing about the Browns is their front has been very good. Mason Graham, you tell me how Browns fans feel about him through 2 weeks. I know that like Pro Football Focus doesn't exactly love the production so far, but if you look at like win rate stats and those sorts of things, and you watch the tape of this front, like they handle their business up front. Yeah. The problem is they've been on the field too damn much. And by the end of these games, like they hung with the Ravens through a half, almost 3/4. And then when your offense can do nothing, like at a certain point, you can't be on the field 60 plays against a good offense and not expect to have some things, the dam is going to break at some point. And that's sort of been at least my impression of what's going on here. The other thing, Jeff Schwartz has called man coverage by far the most in the NFL through 2 weeks, 46% of snaps in man coverage, according to the fantasy points charting. That's 10 percentage points higher than the next closest. So man coverage was a problem last year for Packers receivers. Jaden Reed is hurt. they're going to have to find some ways. They did the last 2 weeks to beat man coverage. They had some interesting wrinkles here. Let's see if Jeff Schwartz, what the counter is and how you move forward here.
Yeah, listen, the Browns love running man. Jim Schwartz has not been shy about
Jim
that.
Schwartz. Jeff Schwartz, you're former offensive lineman.
I was going to say, I figured it was like a Freudian slip thing there. But yeah, he loves running man. And with the corners he has, rightfully so. But I do think, and this is something we can get into, especially when it comes to our key matchups in this game, that Browns secondary got exposed a little bit by the Ravens for the lack of depth that they have. We'll talk about that and some other important matchups that will sort of play themselves out in this game coming up next here on this crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Packers. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS top safety picks plus awards than anyone else as of this past August 2025. From footwork to breathe work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda does too, as they bring the same intention to how they craft every single model of car they produce. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season all year round, which for all of us in Northeast Ohio, we can get all 4 seasons in one day. So that's a helpful little feature that Mazda provides with all their crossover SUV vehicles. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, back out of here on this crossover episode of Locked On Browns and Locked On Packers, setting the stage for Sunday's Week 3 showdown between two teams with two of the best pass rushers in football, and that's, I think, where most of the similarities stop between these two teams right now. Very much different trajectories, but Peter, listen, it's an any given Sunday type of thing. There's a lot that can obviously happen in this game, and you sort of alluded to it before our first little break there, but the Packers receivers dealing with some injuries and all that. But I do think that the Ravens exposed a little bit this past weekend an area in the Browns defense, as good as it is, that is a weakness for them and something that can be a place of opportunity for the Packers if they take advantage of it. And that is in that secondary. Listen, Denzel Ward is all world. He's one of the best corners in this league. Greg Newsome, who for years has said he didn't want to just be a nickel corner and he wanted to play outside, is getting his chance to play outside because Martin Emerson Jr. suffered a season-ending injury in training camp, and he's actually done a really good job. He's held his own. Yeah. But if either of those guys are out, and we saw last week Denzel was cramping a little bit, he wasn't able to play the entire game. There is a lot of the depth at those positions specifically is not very good. And it's interesting too, because Andrew Berry has been adamant about drafting corners generally through his first several years here. He didn't do that this year because I think he was kind of banking on, hey, these guys are ready to kind of get more involved and take that next step. But guys like Cameron Mitchell, guys like Miles Harden, they got picked on against the Ravens. And so even though the Packers obviously are likely going to be without Reed, I think there is some opportunities there in the passing game for them to sort of exploit this Browns team, especially if Denzel Ward or Greg Newsome are off the field for any periods of time.
The Packers spent the whole offseason trying to find answers for man coverage when last year they just didn't have enough of them, and they don't have that one player who can just go be that guy, who can just like, hey, this guy's open just because he's on the field. And we saw DeAndre Hopkins make a couple great plays last week. I mean, I guess the touchdown that wasn't a touchdown, just a guy draped all over him and he still makes the play. The Packers don't really have a player like that. And not that DeAndre Hopkins is 20, I don't know what the good proxy is, like 2020 DeAndre Hopkins or whatever. Like he's not prime DeAndre Hopkins anymore.
Right.
He can still make those plays. The Packers don't really have that. The closest is probably, frankly, Tucker Kraft, who is that big, strong, physical guy. But the Lions, they said, we're gonna play single high, we're gonna stop the run, and we're gonna make you beat man coverage. And guess what the Packers did? Exactly that. Same thing. Dan Quinn, he wants to play man. And the Packers had like Marshawn Lattimore. They went at Marshawn Lattimore, who at least in his prime was one of the better corners in the NFL. And they use spacing. They attack you where you are weakest. They will find your weak player and they will just go at him. If there's one little thing that they're not as good at, they will attack you that way. And so they seem to have found some answers here for man coverage. So to your point about whether it's the nickel corner, whether it's Greg Newsome's backup or Denzel Ward's backup, the Packers, they're willing to attack in those little areas of the field. The thing that is interesting here, Spencer, is the run game for the Packers has not gone on track. Josh Jacobs, although he has a chance if he scores a touchdown this weekend to tie LaDainian Tomlinson as the only players ever to score a touchdown in 12 straight games. The run game has not been what we thought it would be coming into this season. They invested in big bodies, brought in Aaron Banks in the offseason. Well, he's been hurt in and out of the lineup. They used a second-round pick on Anthony Belton. He had to play last week because Zach Tom was hurt. Zach Tom returned to practice on Wednesday in pads, so that's good to see. But he's dealing with a torn oblique muscle. That hurts. I don't know if playing him is even the smart thing to do. Would you rather have Anthony Belton and help, or try and trust a gimpy Zach Tom against Myles Garrett? That's going to be a tough decision that the Packers are going to have to make here. And if you're going to build this plan, right, of how the Browns could win, it's the Packers again can't run the ball, and they're not able to get to some of their shot play stuff because they can't block this front. That would be the way that you would, if you're a Packer fan, you're worried that you have to become one-dimensional, and then all of a sudden you can't block these guys.
Yeah, and that I think that is probably the big difference between last week's opponent for Cleveland and this week's opponent is you're going against Lamar Jackson and loads of weapons for the Ravens. It is interesting because like you look level to level on the Packers, and wide receiver is probably the one area where it's like they don't have like a star, right? Like they have stars.
The Ravens don't either, but they've got a lot of really good players too.
Yeah. And maybe the star for the Ravens is also their tight end with Mark Andrews and maybe Isaiah Likely if he comes along. I guess to your point, like Hopkins is a household name, but not quite the same star that he used to be. But they just, they have
that was more what I was saying. Like you can just sort of like in man coverage, you can just sort of throw him the ball, whether he's open or not, he's open because he can make those plays. The Packers don't really have a guy like that.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. But I do think that's going to be something to watch. Like the nickel corner, the slot corner for the Browns has to be on his P's and Q's and be ready to defend and not give up easily some of those plays that they gave up last week. And I do think, to your point on the run game, this Browns defense has done a pretty good job at limiting the damage in the run game so far this season. We saw that last week against Baltimore. Derrick Henry did not have a very good game. And I think that speaks to just that defensive front and even the linebacking core, which was seen as a weakness for this Browns team. But I think the presence of Carson Schlesinger has made that more of a strength on this defense than it was probably going into the season even.
Spencer, we've spent a lot of time now here talking about this Packers offense. Can you tell me how the Browns are going to score enough points to win this game? Like, how are they going to get to 17?
If I had an answer for you, then the Browns probably wouldn't be 0-2 right now, right? Because every time I think they're going to score more points than that, they don't. In theory, they probably should have scored 20 points, which is something they haven't done in a very, very long time. Dating back to like week 12 was the last time they scored. Last year is the last time they scored 20 more points in a game. And they should have done that in week 1. But of course, Andre Schmidt missed the field goal and the PAT that would have not only gotten you to 20 points, but probably also wins you that game against the Bengals. But yeah, that's the biggest question for this Browns team is, do they have enough firepower on offense to move the ball into range where you can end drives with points? It's been the problem for this team so far in the first 2 games. It was certainly a problem against Baltimore when the defense did everything it could to keep you in that game, keep it within a score or just 2 scores. And then eventually the floodgates kind of opened because the offense gave the Ravens too many opportunities. And so that's where
it's kind of been the problem in Cleveland since Bernie Kosar.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, it really is. The offense is so predicated on making 0 mistakes, and that just hasn't been the case. And when the defense can't force turnovers on the opposite end, they don't get the same opportunities that these other teams get. So that's why I said in the first segment, like Quinshon Judkins, I think is the pivotal player this weekend for this Browns team. Because if he's more up to speed, if he's more ready to go, and he's more sort of integrated into the offense, and they can establish a consistent run game, that opens up some possibilities for Joe Flacco to attack the Packers down the field. But this defense is so good. We talk about key matchups. I am going to be glued to watching Micah Parsons against DeJuan Jones, because DeJuan Jones is somebody who's basically, when he's been healthy, he's been a pretty good right tackle, but he's basically learning the left tackle spot. And last week there was some fatigue there. It was really hot in Baltimore, so he was dealing with some stuff. So much so that they were sort of working in JT Leviston to play left tackle in his place for a few series. So there's some concerns there, and how they, the Packers are all worried about how they stop Myles Garrett. The Browns have to do the same thing on top of trying to just have an offense that's average, and that's not easy to do.
What are the chances outside of a blowout we see Dillon Gabriel in this game?
Probably very slim. Kevin Stefanski has been very, very, what's the right word I'm looking for? He has staunchly denied wanting to see. Yeah, he's been very adamant. That's the word I was looking for. That he doesn't necessarily need to get Dillon Gabriel out there. He was asked about it on Wednesday for a third time since Sunday. Like the idea of, seeing how well he did at the end of that Ravens game. Is there any interest in getting him out there? And he just continues to say that's not where their focus is right now. So I would say it has to be a blowout to get Dillon Gabriel on the field.
He's got to feel like he's not on the hot seat then, right? Like this is not make or break for Kevin Stefanski, that this, like the Joe Flacco thing works then. Because otherwise I feel like you would have a little bit of urgency. I mean, Brian Daboll in New York said, no, like we're going to take our time. And then Jackson Dart played in week 2.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. The belief going into the season with this organization was that both Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are generally safe. So there was comments made by Jimmy Haslam back in the owners' meetings, and then he kind of doubled down on them, I think later in the summer, that they know digging themselves out of the Deshaun Watson debacle was going to take time, that finding their franchise quarterback was going to take time, and that they weren't going to force the issue. And so once you sort of heard him say that, it sort of suggests that these two guys are going to have some time here to try to get this train back on the tracks, if you will, which makes everybody believe they're here for 2025 and they'll get 2026 to try to figure it out. And then we can revisit the subject. But I did say earlier in the week on one of my shows that if the Ravens lost the way that they lost that game, if that becomes the norm, if you get blown out by the Packers, if you get blown out by the Lions the week after that, not only are you going to have to really start considering a quarterback change, but I think then all bets are off. Because if things spiral, if Kevin Stefanski loses the locker room, you can't just end the season and be like, all right, everybody's coming back. Like, you got to think about this from how the rest of the season goes. But it's probably going to get ugly before it gets good again. Because this schedule, especially early on, is not kind to the Browns, as we see this.
I didn't realize it was the schedule. Like, I didn't realize Baltimore, Green Bay, Detroit. Like, that's
well, and then you go to London and play the Vikings, who we don't know a lot about the Vikings offense right now. JJ McCarthy, some questions, but it's in London. And that's why the quarterback question is interesting, because are you going to start Dillon Gabriel, his first start, going to London? Or are you going to start him in Detroit for his first start against a really good Detroit team? And then you come back from London and you go to Pittsburgh, where this team hasn't basically won other than that playoff game in 2020. They haven't won since 2002. It's just not a good stretch to start the season. No. And so this team could be 0-6, but I will try to convince everybody that there's a path to victory on Sunday for the Browns. We'll do that coming up next on this crossover edition of Locked On Packers and Locked On Browns. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-hour energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine for a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get that boost that you need, whether it's during the day or if you're getting ready for a long drive at night. Everyone knows it's pumpkin spice season. People are walking around with their pumpkin spice lattes. Football's back. Fall is in the air. Well, now you can walk around with a brand new pumpkin spice flavored 5-hour energy shot. It's part of 3 new bold holiday themed flavors from 5-hour energy. Enjoy, or enough of the boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to get your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-hour energy shots. Get your favorites that you love and be bold and try something new in store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or on Amazon today. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every single day, but on Prize Picks, being right actually means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, easy, and honestly, one of my favorite ways to follow along with the football season. I love checking projections like Josh Allen, more or less 270 passing yards, or Saquon Barkley, more or less 1 rushing touchdown. And this year, they're offering max discounts, which are easy opportunities for you to cash out. This week, they have a max discount for Patrick Mahomes, 0.5 passing yards. That's an easy play. Just say more, and you're set yourself up to potentially win. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get a $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. All right, so this is the section of the show where we try to project out paths to victory for both teams. I think Peter's going to have an easier time with this. So, Peter, I will let you go first. What is the path to victory in your estimation for this Packers team, who obviously the Browns going in considered an inferior opponent, but because of the defense and because of Myles Garrett, obviously can't be taken lightly and can certainly make life difficult for the Packers to get some points on the board?
Turnovers. I mean, this has been the thing that I've been, and it's in some ways it's the most boring answer, right? Like turnovers are the great equalizer. Yeah. And we saw last year in the postseason when teams are relatively equal, turnovers are ultimately decide the game, and turnovers can cause a team that is technically, maybe even objectively inferior to make it a game. And so that to me is the biggest one here. If the Packers don't turn the ball over, they win. I really think it is that simple, because you would need like special teams calamities, which, by the way, Rich Bisaccia's group, not above a special teams calamity over the years. Matt LaFleur's group has had some of those. That has also been in playoff games and, other situations. So not quite the same circumstances, but it's turnovers. And then, I think beyond that, it's the big plays. Generate them on offense, prevent them on defense. Now, one of those is much easier to do than the other one because the Browns don't create explosives.
Yeah.
So if you can do those two things, I think that you can win. The question is then, how convincing do you have to win? How engaged are you? And this is the thing, Spencer. I talked about this. We have a guest on Wednesdays, and we talked about being locked in for these moments. That it was easy to get up for Detroit week 1, easy to get up 4 days later for the Commanders in week 2. Much harder traveling to Cleveland, first road game of the year, against a team that you're 10-point favorites against, basically, and make sure that you put an ass whooping on that team too. If you can do that, then you really are sort of stamping yourself as a Super Bowl team. But that's what you have to do. You have to be focused every single week, because going on the road and winning against anyone in the NFL is hard. I'm maybe overselling it in this case, because I just don't think the Browns are very good, and I think the Packers can attack them in some specific ways. But if they don't turn the ball over, I really think it is as simple as that. If the Packers are even or ahead in the turnover margin, the Packers win.
Well, I will say this does feel like one of those weird instances where the Browns steal one against a team that they have no business beating, because that happens at least once a year. Once a year. Last year they beat the Ravens randomly.
Packers are being good company, right? Yeah, the Ravens and the Ravens might have been the best team in the league all last season. So,
but to your point on the turnover thing, yes, I think if the Packers can protect the football, they obviously should win this game, and part of it might be they might experience a similar thing the Ravens did last week, where it's a struggle for a little while. Maybe at the half, it's a low-scoring game and the Browns are still in it. And it might just take time to sort of get over that hump and get going, because that's what this Browns defense does to people. It kind of grinds you down for a while, makes life difficult. And the problem isn't ever really the defense as to why the Browns lose. It's always that the offense doesn't complement the defensive effort. And so I think you're right. That could be how this plays out. And if the Packers protect the football, they'll get more opportunities to see that defense. And therefore, later on in the game, we'll probably have the opportunities to exploit them and take some shots downfield and make the plays they need to win.
Okay, but what do you think is the most likely thing to happen?
I'll say this. I do think that there's a world where the Browns keep this close for a little while, because we've seen them do that these first 2 weeks. And that is all that is all the defense. That is just the defense is the strength of this team. The defensive line and the front seven in particular are the strongest units on this team. And so it's not that I think that the Packers are going to win running away initially, because I do think there's a world where the Browns can keep this thing interesting going into the half. But I just have my doubts about the offense being able to do much of anything against this Packers defense. And if they are, it's going to start with what I've brought up now 3 times on the show. It is going to be the run game. Quinshon Judkins comes out, looks like the running back that they drafted to be sort of that workhorse leading guy in the backfield. And if he can be that and actually get this offense moving in a positive direction, specifically on the ground, I think then it opens things up for Joe Flacco to take some deep shots, and then they can maybe attack the Packers defense a little bit differently. But if the game plan ends up just turning into either by default or just because this is what they scheme up, which I don't think this is ideally what they want to scheme up. If it turns into what it's been the last couple of weeks, which is just Flacco dropping back 45 plus times and trying to throw the football, A, Micah Parsons is going to eat them alive. And B, it's just not going to end with them, putting enough points on the board to keep up with this Packers team. I think that is a very fair assessment to this game. But I think the path to victory for the Browns starts with the run game actually getting going this week and Quinshon Judkins being the star running back that he was sort of brought in to be.
Yeah, and let me be clear about this. Like, I have the utmost respect for Kevin Stefanski. I think he is a terrific coach, and I think he has been handed an absolute you-know-what sandwich here with what's gone on over the last couple of years. Yeah. Like, I just think he has not gotten a fair shake at all. And part of that is ownership. I don't even blame the general manager because it seems like ownership has had a strong hand in some of the big decisions over the last few years. Like, we haven't even brought up because he doesn't play football anymore, Deshaun Watson, but that's a big reason.
He's very active on Instagram, but yeah,
why
he doesn't play football.
Why this team is in a position that it's in. And so I think that sucks. And I also have the utmost respect. Myles Garrett, I think, is an absolutely incredible player. Unfortunately, he is defense Joe Thomas. And it sucks that like each generation now has to have this all-time great player playing Cleveland on dog teams. But that's just been what it has been. And I feel for Browns fans. I have Browns fans in my life. And so I don't like it for them because I think Browns fans are awesome fans and they deserve more than this. Yeah. I really believe that. So my bemusement over this team has nothing to do with that because I think the team is bad. And I think the Browns fans deserve so much more than that. I think this is a game the Packers win like 24-10. I think it's that kind of game. And we just sort of move forward. And I don't know that there's even going to be that much interesting to say about it afterward because it's just like, yeah, what we expected to happen happened, and we move on. And we didn't learn that much about either team. And you go to next week, like, and that's from your perspective and mine. Yeah. That's not a great sell for a podcast, but that's how I see this playing out.
Yeah, I'll say this for Myles Garrett. At least he had 2 playoff appearances. Joe Thomas never got any of those, but lately it has not been very good for Myles Garrett.
He's our guy on Locked On Packers. Though. Joe's been on the show a bunch, and we appreciate that. So he always has good insight to offer.
Joe's awesome. He's still very involved in the community here, and people love him. So rightfully so. I think 24-10 is a pretty fair prediction. And like I said, I could see it playing out the way I sort of said, where like maybe the Packers going to halftime up like 14-7 or 14-3, and then they pull away in the second half and the Browns just don't have any answers. I last week, I really thought like the defense would do such a good job that they'd keep it interesting. And then the offense would score at least a little bit, where I thought the Browns would at least cover the 11.5 point spread. I don't even have confidence in them at this point to do that. So I'm not going to say it's going to stay within whatever it is. I think it's 8.5 as of recording this.
Oh, is it? But 9.5 earlier in the week.
Okay. So yeah, 8.5, 9.5, whatever it is. I think the Packers probably do win by at least that. And I do think one thing we didn't hit on that you sort of alluded to, like Stefanski versus LaFleur, is 2 of the better offensive minds in the game. And so to your point, like Kevin, I think does get up for those games and really tries to, pull out some of his best stuff. We'll see if that matters when you have the limitations that you have offensively, but it is kind of a fun matchup from that standpoint too, because these are 2 coaches that do sort of get compared to each other in terms of the offensive prowess that they have.
Well, future Packers offensive coordinator, Kevin Stefanski, we wish him luck.
It's funny because that's probably fair. It's also funny because that's the reason when people talk about firing Kevin Stefanski or not, one of the go-to things is, well, if they fire him, he's going to get hired immediately by somebody else. And I'm like, that's true. But if they lose like they lost last week, and that's a trend, at some point, somebody has to pay the price for the record. So you can't just keep a coach around because he might get hired quickly. I respect the hell out of Kevin Stefanski. I agree with you. I think he is a great offensive coach. We'll see if that matters, or if he can, dig into the bag of tricks a little bit to pull out a win against the Packers. It seems like an uphill battle. But regardless, guys, we appreciate you hanging out with us for this crossover episode of Locked On Browns and Locked On Packers. Peter, I hope we get a chance to do this down the line. Probably not this year because it would take these 2 teams meeting in the Super Bowl. But I enjoyed the conversation, man, and I guarantee we'll do it again soon.
All right. Thanks, Spencer.
Take it easy and keep on following along. Make sure you check out, if you haven't already, for your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast with Tyler, the Madman Roland, giving you a shot of espresso to start your football day. And plus, Tony Wiggins takes you in the barbershop for an evening edition of the show. Or, as always, you can head over and check out both of our versions of the podcast to get an outlook for what the Packers are doing leading up to the game and what the Browns are doing leading up to the game. In the meantime, we appreciate you stopping on by, and we will talk to you again real soon.